Well, Manchester City and Liverpool, as expected, drew first blood in the two first games in the quarter-final round of the UEFA Champions League on Tuesday. And today, on Wednesday, it's the turn of Villarreal, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid and Chelsea to see who will take an advantage into the second leg a week from today. So, confirming City beating Atletico Madrid 1-0 at the Etihad and Liverpool travelling to Portugal and beating Benfica 3-1. In Lisbon sets us up rather nicely for today's games. I am going to introduce my panel in short order, but it's proper for me to tell you that the preview for the game between Bayern Munich and Villarreal starts right now. Bayern Munich and Villarreal is the clash. Brent Sancho is with me. Good morning. Well, good afternoon, Brent.
Yeah, certainly. It's afternoon time here in beautiful Great Summerford, George. A little bit outside of London, but still very much experiencing the British weather. Rain, sleet, snow, some sunshine and everything else.
Well, during the sunshine, for the period of the day, Brent, that the sun is shining, I want to show you something because we have a giveaway for our viewers here at SportsMax as we broadcast this knockout round of the Champions League. And the giveaway is that case of Heineken. I know you could deal with a few of these when the sun is out and shining over there in Summerford, Brent, but it's for our viewers. So we have these prizes for you. We'll be telling you how you can win it not too long from now. Well, right now, giveaway question, there are 4 players in this tie who played for both Chelsea and Real Madrid, who've played for both those teams. Name them. So Real Madrid, Chelsea, 4 players in this tie who've played for both teams. Name those 4 players. So if you name those 4 players on our Instagram page, so you have to go to our Instagram page, you have to go where the Instagram stories are on SportsMax's Instagram page, answer the question there, and of course, the powers that be will organize to see who the winners are or the winner is, and you'll be able to get a few bottles of Heineken. Yeah, you get the whole crate for that matter, not just a few, you get the whole crate, but it is for our Jamaican viewers only. So for our Jamaican viewers only, go to our Instagram page at SportsMax, answer that question. The players in the Real Madrid-Chelsea tie, name the 4 players who've played for both teams, go to our Instagram stories, and you'll be able to win yourself a crate of Heineken. All right, Brent, we've done some business. Now it's time to talk about the football, because if we are to look at the 2 ties overall, Bayern, of course, have won it half a dozen times. Chelsea have won it twice, and Real Madrid is the granddaddy of winning the UEFA Champions League. They've won it 13 times. The defending Europa League champions, that's where the Europa came from, Villarreal, are also in the mix on this Wednesday. Overall, what kind of football are you expecting in those 2 games today?
I think you have a contrast of games. Firstly, the first tie at Bayern Munich and Villarreal, there's a lot of expectancy on the Bavarians to, of course, get results in both legs. And nothing would suggest otherwise. And I think, of course, with the Chelsea and Real Madrid fixture, there is a lot of spice in that one. There's a lot of side plots. There's a lot of variant situations that could, of course, make that result go a particular way. So I think it's 2 contrasting styles as it relates to the games. I would certainly suggest, George, that both fixtures are going to go the distance, meaning that it's going to take 2 legs, I believe, to, of course, deem who would go through to the semi-finals.
All right, since we're here with Bayern and Villarreal, let's start here because Villarreal have a coach, Unai Emery, who has, well, he's into his 18th season as a football coach. He has, 11 trophies under his belt, 7 won in his time at PSG in France, and he's won 4 while coaching a Spanish team, Sevilla. Of course, those 4 Europa League titles. So he's a man who knows how to win trophies. He has this Villarreal team playing perhaps above its individual and collective self. They beat your team Juventus 4-1 in the previous round to get to this stage. And you tend to think that when the big games come around, tactically, Unai Emery is a match for any coach anywhere in terms of setting up his team to get a result in knockout football?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. My team, Juventus. I think at the end of the day, what we saw for Unai Emery in that particular fixture is his tactical ability. And that's what he's lived on, and that's what he's been able to thrive on. And I think what he does to this Villarreal team is that he gives them a platform to play on. And despite some of the shortcomings that they may have in the squad, and one of that shortcomings is the quality, what he presents to them is an opportunity to fight on the big stage. And that is why they are where they are today, because they are a team that tactically can match with the best in the business. And of course, if you mix that with the tenacity, with, of course, the craft and the guile that they present in some of the varying positions, you have a Villarreal team that could create one or two stirs. And I think as much as we do heavily favor Bayern Munich in this tie, you cannot sleep on Villarreal.
Juan Arango has joined the conversation. Good afternoon, Juan. Juan, are you hearing us?
Can you hear? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we're hearing you now. We're hearing you now.
Okay.
Good.
The people that are going to win that Heineken thing, remember that they have to invite us to their house.
All right, if you say so, my friend. You've joined us at a good time. We're talking about Villarreal and their manager, Unai Emery, and the fact that he is so tactically astute that to underrate his teams could prove criminal and crucial for his rivals. We saw what he did with the instructions and the tactics against Juventus. It paid handsome dividends. Is it beyond Unai Emery to mastermind Bayern's downfall over these two legs?
No, it's not. It's a very realistic happening. That's why Julian Nagelsmann can't underestimate this Villarreal side, who can end up surprising you, whether it's by locking you down defensively, by having good transition play, but also being able to handle the ball against the Bayern Munich. Let's keep in mind, Bayern are still being rattled by injuries. There's certain players that are just coming back, but in key positions, there's still players that really need to start coming back into the fray, I should say. Keep in mind, you're not going to have Manuel Neuer. You're not going to have Alphonso Davies. So right there and then, you start to miss some key components to that back line, and also maybe that first bit of pace coming out of the back that can really create some interesting situations up top. But then again, when you have Robert Lewandowski, you end up having that luxury of saying, you know what? Okay, bring whatever you have. I have the best number 9 in the world. Try and stop me.
Yep. Brent, when you look at Arnaud Danjuma, he's been giving some interviews in recent time, the Dutchman, and he is saying that he thinks that on current form, he is one of the best wingers in the world, either side, right or left. The man says he believes he's one of the best wingers in the world. He's really done well for Villarreal this season. He's their leading goal scorer in all competitions with 13, their leading goal scorer in the Champions League with 5. And at 25 years old, the Dutchman is playing the best football of his career. And he says, under Unai Emery's leadership, Villarreal and himself fear nobody. Confidence or cocky, Brent Sancho from Danjuma?
I think there's some saying along with self-praise or something like that. I think we know where that goes. Yeah, he's a bit cocky, I think. The best winger in the world? Not sure about that, but he's certainly right in suggesting that under Unai Emery, there's a certain level of belief within Villarreal. Hence the reason they could have gone to Manchester United at Old Trafford and put in the performance that they did. And that's what Unai Emery brings to them. I think when you sit in a locker room and you have a coach that spells it out for you tactically and tells you exactly what you need to do to beat a football team, that gives you a lot of impetus to go out there on the pitch. And that's exactly what he does. He spells it out to his players. He breaks it down. He gives it a plan that any player 1 through 11 that's on that pitch has a full understanding what is needed by them to get a result. And that is key when you're, of course, trying to punch above your weight, and that's exactly what Villarreal does.
Yeah, Juan, the fact is that 2 of the players who are expected to start for Villarreal today, they're a goalkeeper Geronimo Rui and Pau Torres in the defense. They have played every minute of the 8 Champions League games that they've played this season. So that's solidity in the back. And when you look at there are 8 players who've played in all 8 Champions League games, and there's only 1 midfielder in there. There's a goalkeeper and the rest of them are defenders. So the base, the spine of the Villarreal side is solid and consistent. Is this the step ladder, Juan, on which they climb and hope to punch Bayern in the vulnerable part of their body, their makeup?
Well, this is what that's pretty much their MO. I mean, ever since they've been a first division team, that's been their MO ever since they've been a team that has been vying for spots in European football. That's pretty much been their MO, having a solid spine, but also having those individual players that can create off one pass, off one dribble, off one moment of inspiration, if you will. I mean, it's a group of players that do have that collective mentality. Brent mentioned that each and every player understands what they have to do, but on top of that, they understand what their teammate has to do, which makes their life much easier. They understand that their teammate has to be in X place, so that helps them be in Y. That ends up being very important when it comes to Villarreal and their possibilities of being able to win, lose, or draw. Well, no one knows, but at least being able to compete and being able to give a headache to these teams at the top level, at the elite level of European football. The problems that they've been able to give them historically, Bayern Munich is going to be one of those teams that definitely is on that list.
Yeah. Brent, let's change tack now and talk about the Germans, because if we go back to that first leg in the last 16 tie against Salzburg, we did see vulnerabilities in that game. Make no mistake, the 1-1 wasn't a false result by any stretch. And even in the second leg against Salzburg, Brent, where they won 7-1, it was largely due to the kind of defending from Salzburg that if you saw that in the SSFL or the Manning or the Costa Cup schoolboy football competitions in Jamaica, you would take those schoolboys out of the team and tell them that they'd have to do a lot of training and improvement in training to get their games back. In other words, schoolyard schoolyard standard defending is what assisted Bayern to run out 7-1 winners in that second leg against Salzburg. That said, are those vulnerabilities across those two Salzburg games and other results this season enough to doubt whether Bayern can get to the promised land of another Champions League victory this season?
No, I don't think it's enough to doubt, but it's certainly something to be concerned about. And to add to your point, one thing we know about Bayern and what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 Champions League is their vulnerability to pace going the other way, counter-attacks, transition play. They really do struggle because they play a very high line. They play adventurous football. They play on the front foot. And when you have teams that play that way, you do have, of course, an Achilles heel, and that is pace behind their defenders. And every time, of course, Bayern Munich comes up against teams like that, they struggle because they put a lot of numbers forward. So, you know, when you look at what Villarreal presents, yes, there are some concerns for Bayern Munich, but I think overall what they do going the other direction is where I think they win football games. And I would feel that if they are to get that side of things correct, I just don't think Villarreal has a chance to live with them. Yeah,
it's all about Robert Juan Arango. This time last season, he was injured, picked up an injury in a World Cup qualifier for Poland. It's ironic. This season, at this time, he got a knock in his last World Cup qualifier for Poland. Hence, he didn't make an appearance didn't last the distance against Freiburg in the league, and he didn't score in that game. Robert was absent, and they got knocked out of the Champions League last year. Robert is present. Does that mean that Bayern will saunter right the way through to the final?
I don't know about saunter their way into the final, but they have a good case every time he's on the pitch. There is a dependence to a certain extent, maybe not Real Madrid, Benzema type of dependence, but you do have a supporting cast there. And of course, all the lights and all the flash and all the headlines are going to go to Robert Lewandowski. But there's one player that we rarely ever mention. It's Thomas Müller, who's the one that really makes things happen in the middle. It's Joshua Kimmich who ends up making plays in the middle. Those are the players that end up being that catalyst. You might even have a Kingsley Coman or a Serge Gnabry that ends up playing out wide, that ends up being another factor for Bayern Munich. But of course, everything starts and ends with Robert Lewandowski, especially going on the offensive side. Defensively, especially when you have Upamecano, who hasn't been able to adapt too well, and Lucas Hernandez playing as a central defender, there lie my doubts. Up top, none whatsoever.
Brent, Juan said something very interesting just now, that, you know, it's not just Robert alone. He mentioned Thomas Müller and Joshua Kimmich in midfield, but we saw those in the Bayern team last season when Lewandowski was absent, and they were easy pickings as they were knocked out of this competition. Brent, the facts are simple and easy to digest. This man scores a goal every 58 minutes for this team this season. That is insane by any measure. Isn't it safe to assume then, Brent Sancho, that that Lewandowski would have to have an off day by himself because no defense in world football is good enough to stifle his attacking threat?
Yeah, he would have to have an off day over 2 legs, I would suggest. And I think what he brings is he is a cherry on top. He is the one that, of course, takes the ingredients that the rest of Bayern Munich brings and make it into that beautiful cake. And I think that's what he's good at. And that's the reason why, of course, Poland is in the World Cup. It's the reason why Bayern Munich has won and been so successful both in the Bundesliga and in the Champions League, is because he is the guy that brings it all together. And if he's on an off day, then you don't have a cake, you have ingredients.
Juan, Corentin Tolisso didn't last the distance against Freiburg. Well, he's injured. I think he tore a thigh muscle in that game, so he's out for a bit. Leon Goretzka, back from injury, didn't last the distance again because he's being carefully managed after his first game in 4 months. I mentioned those 2 players by name. Juan, to suggest that those 2 absentees have caused something to not quite be present in the Bayern Munich performances we've seen recently, and may explain some of the vulnerabilities that they've had. Neither man expected to play a part today in the first day. Well, certainly not Tolisso because of the torn muscle. But do you think that they can take care of business here and go on with confidence without those 2 fit and available to Julian Nagelsmann?
Well, I mean, for starters, they're going to have Serge Gnabry and they're going to have Kingsley Coman coming in. So immediately you start seeing when you have that type of depth. I'm not saying that they're not going to miss those 2 players. They're going to, but you have players that can go in, step in, and be just as effective. Like I said, I'm not trying to indicate, or dismiss them in any way, shape, or form. But Bayern do have that width and do have those options in wider play that they can recur to different options and be able to really come through in a big way here in Villarreal. Again, I don't think that the match that's going to set them apart is this one. I think it's going to be the return leg when they play in Munich.
Yeah. Brent, I can't recall a Bayern Munich team with as many dodgy center halves as this one has. I must be fair to you. I don't rate Upamecano at all. Niklas Süle, the jury is still out. And as outstanding as Manuel Neuer is, I think those 2 men especially give Manuel Neuer sleepless nights. So if I'm looking at for an Achilles heel in this Bayern Munich team, Brent, I'm suggesting that Achilles heel is obvious. It says at the back because the center half pair, whichever 2 they field, not very strong.
Is it okay if I put my defender's hat on now? Is that fine?
That's fine.
I'm gonna protect them here. And look, most defenders at this level would hope to have some sort of support defensively, whether it be that shield in number 6 or a double pivot in that area. Bayern doesn't really give you that kind of cover because they throw so many numbers forward. When you play with your wing backs that high up the park, you're asking your defenders, your center halves, to defend in areas that they're very, very uncomfortable in defending in. So in my defense, and of course with my defenders union hat on, I would suggest that it's all down to the tactical approach by Bayern Munich, why these poor lads at the back do struggle at times.
Brent, can I get Juan, can I get a co-sign on the fact that Upamecano, Niklas Süle are bits and bobs rather than solid center halves?
I can even add Jerome Boateng. I can add Mats Hummels. I can add many of the other central defenders that have come before. That at times the jury was out on them as well. But what Brent said, Bayern is not a team that's going to have a solid back line of 4 or a back line of 5 with 2 number 6s in front of those central defenders to be able to protect them, because their pressure is somewhere else on the pitch. Their recovery is higher up on the pitch. That's what makes them such a dangerous side. When they drop back, they end up being and looking just as vulnerable as any other team in Europe when they don't have the ball at their feet and they end up having to be in their own final third. But that being said, the options that you have with 2 players like Upamecano and like Lucas Hernandez, who will be starting in the middle again today, is, well, they can play out of the back. And that's what you need with a team like Bayern. When you have a Manuel Neuer who, hey, guys, go forward, I got your back. That seems to be a bit of a risk, but it's part of the luxury that Bayern has when they have one of the best goalkeepers in the world being able to guard them and being able to guard them in that way.
Hear you on that. All right, gentlemen, before we take the break and come back and preview the feature game today, your predictions for this game, Juan?
3-1 Bayern.
Brent?
2-1 to Bayern Munich.
All right, we'll take the break. When we come back, we'll talk Chelsea, Real Madrid.
The WTA moves to the picturesque city of Bogota, Colombia, where hometown girl and defending champion 20-year-old Maria Osorio is top seed of the Copa Colsanitas, coming your way from April 7 to 10 on your home of champions.
This is where the magic happens. All of the preparation before we go on air, we talk about the things we talk about.
I'm sure the phone is on vibrate.
Get the lotion already. I don't wear a jacket every day.
This is it. The go-to television sports show in the Caribbean.
Come back to this.
The SportsMax Zone.
LeBron James is the greatest athlete in the history of sport, which is absolute nonsense. We threw that away.
She is the greatest of all time.
Weekdays, 4:30 p.m., 5:30 p.m. ECT on your home of champions, SportsMax.
Versus 2, Real Madrid versus Chelsea. That's the clash. Incredibly, Real Madrid have never beaten Chelsea in European club competition. They've played them 5 times, and the illustrious Spaniards have never gotten the better of the London team. And in those 5 games, they've drawn 2 and lost 3. And no other team in Europe can have that boast, having played Real Madrid as many times as that, and yet to taste defeat. But Chelsea, the lone team in that bracket, they hold the Indian sign over Real in European club competition, the only team, as I noted, that can say that. We send you back to remind you of what happened when these teams met in the semi-finals of this very competition a year ago.
The setting may be small, but the stakes here are very high. Rudiger. Good start this from Chelsea. But here goes Pulisic. He's got Werner to work with. Pulisic going on his own and scoring for Chelsea. In the 14th minute, an outstanding goal from the American. Kroos goes short with the corner. Marcelo. Casemiro to keep it alive. Benzema, brilliant! 3 headers, Casemiro, Militao, Benzema, then the volley. The hors d'oeuvres, excellent, but the main course at Stamford Bridge in 8 days' time.
Yeah, so that's how the first leg ended in Spain. Real, of course, were playing at their training pitch as the Bernabeu was undergoing renovations. 1-1 in that game. Of course, Chelsea went on to finish the job, but that's next week. The final chapter will be presented for you. Brent Sancho and Juan Arango are still with me. Gentlemen, let's start with Chelsea, the English team. Christian Pulisic, not involved in the defeat against Brentford. He had a knock. All accounts suggest he will be available for Chelsea today. They have had problems scoring in all competitions this season, and you get the sense that Tuchel still has to find the formula to get the best out of his attacking players. That said, Kai Havertz is expected to lead the line today. Do Chelsea approach this game, Juan Arango, confident that they can repeat what they did to Real Madrid last season?
It should be. They're the reigning European champs and have to show it against the team that's wanted the most, against the biggest club in the world. First and foremost, I mean, that's the most basic answer. But to delve into it a little bit more, you see a Thomas Tuchel that's been, or at least the talk is that he's going to play with a back line of 5 or a back line of 3, depending on how you look at it. You're going to see also, it's not just Pulisic and Kai Havertz up top, it's also the insertion of Mason Mount. You're going to start seeing these types of options for Thomas Tuchel. So again, for Chelsea, it's a case of being able to affirm themselves, to consolidate themselves. This is where the measuring stick of their season begins. Maybe getting closer to the top spots in the Premier League, but also being able to assert themselves as the reigning monarchs in European football.
Brent, if we are fair to ourselves, when the draw was made for the last 16 last year, not many people except Chelsea fans felt that this was a team that would go on to win the Champions League. There were other teams that people were looking at, so they weren't heralded as champions-elect then. At this point this season, are you looking at them as having the tools to defend this title if they play well and if the opponents they're likely to face beyond this point play well as well?
Yeah, they certainly have the tools, but I don't think they're the favourites. And probably going back to last season, I would probably put them where I had them last season, as a team with the possibilities, but certainly not the full-on quality that the other teams in the tournament present. And you'd have to point to Liverpool and Man City to prove to that point. So if both teams, if Chelsea is to play to their potential and a Liverpool or Man City play to their potential, I don't think Chelsea would retain the title. That being said, there is something about a Thomas Tuchel side that presents a lot of dangers for teams like your Liverpool's, your Man City, and of course their opponents today, Real Madrid, is that they're consistent, they're well-drilled, they're very organized, and more importantly, they are tactically astute. And I think those are the types of things that Chelsea brings to the game here today, and why you would have to suggest that as much as they may be lacking in quality, they're certainly a team with the tools to defend their title.
Yeah, let's hear what Christian Pulisic had to say before the game.
Definitely take confidence. Obviously, we got good results against them last year, and we're going to hope to do the same this year. Obviously, it's a big team. It's never going to be easy. Champions League knockout game, but knowing that we've done it last season, we've even won it all last season. We should feel confident, and that's our mindset going into it.
Yeah, it's funny that we're talking about Chelsea and we're talking about firepower and the troubles that they've had scoring goals, and we have a team of Werner in the squad who cost a fortune, and Romelu Lukaku who cost an even greater fortune, and neither man really cracking the code for Thomas Tuchel's side just yet. Let's talk about Mason Mount for a moment though, Juan Arango. 2 seasons ago he shaped as if he was the best player at Chelsea. In my book, he was the best player at Chelsea. Last season, I think he consolidated that position, notwithstanding the contributions of Kai Havertz. In my book though, Juan, I don't think he's quite hit those heights this season.
He hasn't, and fortunately there have been others that have kind of been able to fill in, Pulisic being one of them, and you start to see others sort of become a bit more protagonistic in that role. But if he ends up really taking over these types of matches, he can end up making the difference. He can be that type of player that can end up taking over and really putting a Real Madrid side who's still lingering and suffering from that El Clasico loss, and they can end up kind of steamrolling against them. So again, don't discount Mason Mount in any way, shape, or form in this match. He can end up being a big difference maker. And keep in mind that you see Tuchel making a bit of a change in his formation to be able to bring Mason Mount in and be able to give a bit of a different look to Real Madrid. And we're going to see how that ends up being.
Yeah, the presence of Antonio Rudiger in the back line for Chelsea, as we discuss one more talking point about Chelsea, Brent. Rudiger's contribution in the game. Last season, he was brilliant with those passes over the top. We saw the Pulisic goal we showed you in that first leg against Real Madrid, created by him, a pass from deep, a pass you'd expect your midfielder to make. He also chipped in with some crucial goals, and he's known to be able to join the attack from deep as a centre-half, popping up in a zone that the defenders wouldn't expect him to. Notwithstanding the contract negotiations that have clouded his continued employment at Chelsea, the German has improved under Thomas Tuchel, is consistent under Tuchel, and you would expect him to be one of Chelsea's best players today and next week if Chelsea is to progress beyond this point again, Brent.
You forgot to add that he was written off by Frank Lampard, but that's another story, of course. But listen, I think when you look at the attributes that he presents and what he's been able to do, he's such an unassuming centre half. He doesn't look like the luxury of a Rafael Varane, of course, Thiago Silva. That type of centre half, but he presents all of the different particles and ingredients that you see with a modern day centre half, and he's got the speed, he's got certainly the ability to read games, and he's good in the football. And is that the latter in terms of his what he does on the football is what makes him a special player. And every time he puts on that Chelsea shirt, every time he plays football for Chelsea, his stock rises. He has been exceptional for them. And I think you're right in what you're saying in terms of what he brings to the table. You're really stretched to think what Chelsea would be like without him. And yes, as much as we try to stay away from the contract negotiation talk, I think he would be a massive miss to Chelsea if they allow him to leave.
Yep, Juan G, Big Benz, Karim Benzema. Oh, the man is in tremendous form right now. For the 4 consecutive seasons, Benzema has hit 20 or more goals across the campaign. He is as right as hands can make him. Real Madrid's stocks, Real Madrid's chances, Juan, you feel, depend largely on whether Benzema can continue his tremendous goal-scoring form.
Yeah, and as I mentioned it before when we were talking about Robert Lewandowski, is that there's a bit more dependency on Karim Benzema than there is on Robert Lewandowski on Bayern's side. I mean, those are obviously some terms that you end up kind of not lamenting at times, but at times you end up seeing with Real Madrid's performances, and you see him on the pitch compared to when he's off the pitch, and it's a different side. The intangibles he brings forth. Yes, all the goals and all the numbers do help bolster his case, but it's the times that he's not on the pitch. What he's able to create, and as you're seeing right now, the first goal against PSG being that catalyst that ends up starting that rally to come back against Leo Messi's side, you end up seeing a very charismatic player, a player that is not only just an offensive juggernaut, but also that first line of defense for Real Madrid. And when he's not there, you notice it because of the lack of presence and also the lack of character that many others have shown in certain instances.
Yeah, Brent Sancho, last year we saw Vinicius Jr. take a massive step forward into claiming a role as a superstar for Real Madrid. But yet, when that Chelsea game came around, he was almost non-existent, not effective at all across the 2 legs. This year he's had some brilliant games, but in other moments he's disappeared. It is par for the course for young players. But does he also need to be at his very, very, very best to help this Real Madrid team get past this Chelsea?
Yeah, absolutely. As much as we talk a lot about Benzema's performance this season and how much of a leader he is, and as Juan rightfully said, that you do miss Benzema when he's off the pitch. I think that man on your screen is equally as important. He's up there as well, because what he brings is a lot of what Benzema doesn't bring. And I think that is why he's such an important player. And more importantly, I think the way he's been able to lift his game, even from last season, I don't think he's the same player that Chelsea would have seen last season. I think he's a lot different in what he's bringing. And more importantly, he plays with a tremendous amount of confidence. And so if he plays the way that we know he can play and what he's been doing throughout, of course, the season for Real Madrid, I think Chelsea would be in for a long night, because he's a special player and he's starting to show that week in, week out. And I believe that if he is able to produce the goods, as they say in football, I think he would be a catalyst for Real Madrid's success in this tie.
Juan, Luka Modric and Toni Kroos, they were not best pleased with how Chelsea dumped their team out of this competition last season. Both men, vastly experienced, play very well together. I wouldn't be surprised if they're godfather to each other's children. The experience they have, Juan, the quality they have, you would not expect them to be as muted, as subdued this time as they were last year against Tuchel's boys.
Well, that's part of the reason why we start to see more of a flooded midfield, to try and prevent them from being able to circulate the ball with a great deal of ease. And when you see Luka Modric have 2 or 3 players on top of him, it's going to have to be Toni Kroos or vice versa. And you start to see these 2 players, and that's where the key to unlocking defenses ends up being. Is it Benzema has a lot to do with it, with his runs off the ball and when he has the ball inside of the area. But it's these 2 that are able to maneuver the ball, find the right spots, find the right players, make the right decisions on the pitch, that are the ones that are the key contributors in the midfield for Real Madrid. Without them, I don't know if they get as far as they are right now.
Brent, the Gareth Bale question. What we know is that there is still a lot of fire in this Welshman. We saw it for Wales in the recent international break. A fantastic free kick to help his team forward, and of course, all-round play beyond that. For Real, he is the invisible man. He is the forgotten man. Does Carlo Ancelotti need Gareth Bale's contribution to help Real get over this line? We're not hearing you, Brent. We're not hearing you.
I said if for some reason he gets, of course, Real Madrid to wear the Welsh outfit for both ties, then maybe Gareth Bale could be used. But outside of that, he's not going to contribute anything. I think his ship has sailed. He's certainly not going to, of course, put in the types of performances we've been seeing he's doing for Wales. I think there's too much animosity. There's not enough. The chemistry is not there. Everything is off as it relates to that. As much as, I agree, he's a special talent. But for Real Madrid, I think that ship is sailed.
All right, let's look at the lineups, gentlemen, for both teams. Chelsea, Mendy, Rudiger, Christensen, Jorginho, Thiago Silva, whose wife made an impassioned defense of his contribution to the team recently. Conte, Pulisic, Mason Mount, Reece James is back, Azpilicueta and Kai Havertz. May I ask you, Brent Sancho, if as we expect that Vinicius Jr. is lining up for Real Madrid, talk to me about the duel between Reece James and Vinicius Jr. on that side of the pitch.
I just want to say quickly that I wish my wife made those sort of appeal that Silva wives made in football. But no, I think the wide part of the pitch is certainly where I believe Real Madrid will get that joy. We know how high Reece in particular likes to play. And if he does not track, of course, they expect Kante and Jorginho to do that work. But if there's some sort of communication mix-up, if there's not the right balance, and Vinicius Jr. is given the space, it could be trouble. And that's why I said, I think Vinicius Jr. is the wild card in all of this. I think if he has a big game, then I think Chelsea can be in big trouble. 3 at the back, the right thing for Tuchel to do with the resources at his disposal, Juan?
Well, if you start looking at who is going to be out wide for Real Madrid, it's going to be, first of all, having Reece James or Azpilicueta be those buffers for those wide players. And then also Andreas Christensen and Rudiger being able to come in and making the difference there, establishing that 1v2 or trying to limit the amount of penetration that those wide players have. But I would disagree a bit as far as the wild card for Real Madrid, though.
All right, let's look at
in just a second.
Yeah, let's look at the Real Madrid starting 11, and then we can pick your brain further, Juan. Courtois, Carvajal, Eder Militao, David Alaba, Toni Kroos, Benzema, Modric, Casemiro, Valverde, and Vinicius Jr. So from this selection, the matchups are Juan Arango. The matchups, man for man, formation for formation, now that you've seen the Real Madrid 11.
You start looking out wide over on Real Madrid's side. Carvajal's always going to be the one that defenses are going to be pointing towards, especially when you have an Eder Militao coming in on yellow card caution, number one. Number two, my wild card for Real Madrid is not going to be Vinicius Jr. It's going to be Federico Valverde. He's right now in very good form, had a tremendous international date with Uruguay. Maybe you could start, I don't think any of the players from Real Madrid ended up escaping any type of criticism during El Clásico. But Valverde, throughout his recent form, has been able to show some promise. Playing out wide could be a difference, although I see him dropping behind Karim Benzema, being a bit of a diamond 4-4-2 in a certain formation there, in a certain way. He's going to be able to handle the middle and also try and even up the numbers in the midfield for Real Madrid and take some of that pressure off of Modric, Kroos, and also from Casemiro.
Hear you on that. Predictions, gentlemen. Brent, call it for me.
Type 1. I believe Chelsea 1-0.
Juan?
Along the same lines, 2-1 Chelsea.
2-1 Chelsea. Both men say only 1 goal difference between the teams. All right, I'll see you at halftime. Let's send you across to Stamford Bridge in West London. It's Chelsea Real Madrid first leg. Remember, the Bayern Villarreal game is available on the SportsMax app.
Just watch the UEFA Champions League pre-game show on SportsMax, sponsored by Heineken.
Watch me and them. Big man. They got skip now.
Boss him, man. I'm not man. He's sick, man. Go show my boss.
30 boxes on the distributor, listen.
6 box of Black Stallion, the boss.
How we plan to carry so much Black Stallion?
Trick with Star!
Black Stallion, the bedroom tonic. Visit our newest store at Catherine Hall Plaza, Montego Bay.
Eintracht Frankfurt, FC Barcelona, UEFA Europa League first leg quarterfinal action, live on SportsMax, Thursday.
Who are also, of course, in the quarter-finals this time around. That was in the campaign prior to last year. But history only takes you so far. Thomas Tuchel said hasn't looked at the 2 games between the 2 clubs in 2021. He's far more concerned about the recent form, which apart from that slip-up in El Clasico, has been very good for Real Madrid.